Good evening and welcome to Crescent Research Center's expert interview series. Today, we will take a broader look at the current Middle East crisis. Our discussion will focus on the general strategic position of several key European powers and explore what this crisis could mean for regional stability and Europe's own security interests. And it is my pleasure to introduce our today's distinguished guest, Senor Carlos Uriarte Sanchez. He is a professor at the International University of La Rioja, Spain, and president of Pan Europa Spain. Thank you for being with us today, there, Carlos.
Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Tural. It's a pleasure for me.
Thank you. Okay, we could proceed with the first question. In their recent joint statement, the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany condemned Iran's, I quote, indiscriminate and disproportionate, end of quote, missile and drone attacks across the region and called for an immediate halt to Iranian strikes. Given this, how would you describe the UK, Germany, and France's current strategic position on the crisis?
Thank you for the question. I mean, from a pro-European perspective, the joint statement by the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, I think that could be interpreted as a reaffirmation of several classic pillars of European foreign policy. First, defense of the international order. Second, containment of escalation. Third, the primacy of diplomacy while not renouncing deterrence. Regarding the crisis, I think that European leaders, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, they have a strategic position of these three countries, two key EU members, and the United Kingdom as a strategic post-Brexit partner. And in my opinion, they are seeking to prevent a regional escalation that could further destabilize the Middle East. On the other hand, defend the principle of proportionality and international law by condemning indiscriminate attacks. And additionally, protect European security, given that regional instability directly affects Europe. For instance, energy, migration, terrorism, trade, etc. In this regard, they are not positioning themselves as belligerent actors, but rather as stabilizing powers concerned with containing the conflict before it develops into a broader confrontation. Additionally, their messages are aligned with European Union foreign policy. Why? Because a large extent, we could say that yes, it's in consonance with the line of the European general foreign policy, because the foreign policy of the European Union is based on multilateralism, defense of international law, diplomatic conflict resolution, graduated use of sanctions, rejection of disproportionate actions. It means that the condemnation of indiscriminate and disproportionate attacks reflects the European Union's typical diplomatic language. The European Union tends to condemn violations of international law, additionally call for restraint from all parties, prioritize diplomatic channels, support targeted sanctions when deemed necessary. In this regard, from a pro-European perspective, the statement is consistent with this strategic line. Of course, in the European Union, we prioritize diplomacy, sanctions, or defensive measures. Well, it's depending on the cases, but from a Europeanist point of view and approach, the hierarchy would like be as first, diplomacy as first approach to a conflict. In the European policy, we prioritize historically dialogue, mediation, and maintaining open communication channels, even in a high-tension context. Particularly regarding Iran, the European Union has long defended diplomatic frameworks, such as the nuclear agreement, as an example of preventive diplomacy. The second mechanism in the approach to conflicts to be solved that we used in the European Union are, if diplomacy doesn't work, sanctions. Or we use both mechanisms at the same time, diplomacy plus sanctions. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about the second mechanism, sanctions. We use sanctions as a political pressure tool, as an alternative to military action, and as a strategic, it's an allying mechanism. However, they are usually framed as calibrated and reversible measures. And thirdly, the so-called defensive measures. This is the last mechanism that we use. Why? Because defensive measures are seen as a support, and the support may include, first, reinforcing regional security, second, protecting allies, third, enhancing air and naval defense cooperation. Yet Europe generally seeks to ensure such measures are not interpreted as a preparation for offensive escalation. And how we can manage, or how we can balance the European approach with cooperation with the United States and advocate for a defense of moderation. Well, here lies a key feature of contemporary Europeism, because our Europeism and our values have been always linked to the defense of human rights and linked to rule of law and multilateralism. But we must understand that now we live in the time of realpolitik. And in this regard, what we try is to keep a so-called realist approach to the crisis with values. I mean, we try to have a pragmatic and realistic approach to the problems of the world based on values. Before, it was a more idealistic approach. Now we have changed a little bit this approach to a more realistic one, but we don't want to don't take into consideration also the values as a factor to implement our foreign and security policy. Then for us, it's very important to keep the transatlantic cooperation with the United States, but at the same time, it's crucial for European Union coupled with the pursuit of European strategic autonomy. It means our cooperation with the United States must be compatible with the so-called European strategic autonomy. The logic is twofold. Western unity, on the one hand, in condemning attacks and defending allies, and on the other hand, encouraging restraint to prevent a disproportionate response that could widen the conflict. European Union often plays the role of a moderating actor and an indirect diplomatic channel, a counterbalance to potentially more forceful responses or answers. And from a pro-European standpoint, this is not contradictory, but complementary. The US provides military deterrence, but Europe, at the same time, contributes multilateral legitimacy and diplomatic engagement. In conclusion, and to sum up, from this perspective, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany are, in this moment, seeking to preserve regional stability, acting consistently with Europe's diplomatic tradition. At the same time, the three countries are using condemnation as a tool of political pressure. And fourthly, the three countries are pursuing a strategy that combines firmness with restraint. This priority doesn't appear to be military escalation, but rather preventing a broader regional war, upholding international law, and reinforcing Europe's role as a responsible and stabilizing geopolitical actor.
Well, thank you for this insightful answer. That was a very profound one, and it had some heavy points. And turning to the second question, so this E3 statement said that the three countries are prepared to take, I quote, necessary and proportionate defensive measures, end of quote, to protect their interests and those of their allies, and to coordinate with partners, including the United States. What specific actions might the UK, Germany, and France undertake in the coming days or weeks, and how these actions could differ across the three governments?
Okay, again, from a pro-European perspective, the so-called E3 statement signals unity, deterrence, and coordination rather than escalation for its own sake. When the United Kingdom, Germany, and France speak of necessary and proportionate defensive measures, they are typically referring to a calibrated mix of diplomatic, economic, military, and legal steps designed to defend European security, uphold international law, and reinforce transatlantic cohesion. But which are the specific actions that they could undertake? Well, first of all, diplomatic measures. For instance, joint demarches and coordinated messaging through the European Union, NATO, and the United Nations to reaffirm red lines and signal unity. Second, convening emergency meetings at the European Union Foreign Affairs Council or NATO level to align responses. And thirdly, expelling diplomats or recalling ambassadors if the situation involves a hostile state act, example, cyber attacks, violation of sovereignty, etc. A hostile state act, for example, with cyber attacks, violations of sovereignty, etc. Europeanist reading sees this as strengthening the European Union's geopolitical role while maintaining NATO as the cornerstone of the so-called collective defense. A second action that could be taken by the E3 could be the economic and sanctions tools. First, with targeted sanctions against individuals, companies, or sectors. For instance, financial, energy, defense-related, etc. Additional sanctions tools could be asset freezes and travel bans coordinated with the United States to maximize impact. And thirdly, another sanctions tools that we could mention are the trade or export controls, especially on dual-use technologies. Within the European Union framework, France and Germany would likely push for sanctions through Brussels to ensure European Union-wide backing, whereas the United Kingdom, post-Brexit, would implement parallel measures under its autonomous sanctions regime, but closely aligned and working together with the European Union and Washington. And another specific action that might be undertaken by the so-called E3 are the so-called military and security posture, reinforcing NATO's eastern flank through troop deployments or air policing missions, or enhanced intelligence sharing and cyber defense cooperation, and additionally, naval deployments or freedom of navigation operations depending on the theater of tension. This would be defensive in nature, framed as deterrence rather than escalation. Europeanist lens emphasizes complementary between European Union defense initiatives, such as the so-called PESCO or the European Defense Fund, and NATO commitments. And another action that could be undertaken in the so-called E3 are legal and normative steps. For instance, supporting investigations in international courts if international law has been violated. Or second, documenting evidence of breaches of sovereignty or human rights to reinforce accountability. Such measures underline Europe's identity as a rules-based actor committed to multilateralism. But of course, every government could manage this in a different way. For instance, France traditionally emphasizes strategic autonomy and may advocate a robust European-led response. Paris could push for a stronger European Union defense coordination, signals readiness to deploy forces abroad, because France maintains significant expeditionary capabilities, and additionally, France framed the response in terms of European sovereignty. And we have seen a clear example with the declarations of Emmanuel Macron saying that we could use in Europe also the nuclear deterrence, the nuclear capabilities of France as a mechanism of deterrence. And already 8 European Union member states, they have said that they want to cooperate with France in this issue to develop more nuclear capabilities. But the German approach, it's a little bit different because Germany often prioritizes economic leverage and diplomatic engagement, likely to focus heavily on sanctions and European Union unity. And Germany normally proceeds cautiously on military escalation. Additionally, Germany stressed the de-escalation and dialogue alongside deterrence. However, Berlin has in recent years shown greater willingness to invest in defense, reflecting a shift in its security posture. And in this conflict, Federal Chancellor Merz met with President Trump, and Merz has given a clear message that it's important to finish with the theocratic regime of Iran. And in this regard, Germany is more close to the Israeli positions and Trump's position than the French position. Germany in this moment is closer to Israel and to the United States. And regarding the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom, while outside the European Union, remains a key European security actor. Why? Because the United Kingdom may adopt a firmer rhetorical stance. Additionally, the United Kingdom can act swiftly through intelligence, cyber capabilities, and sanctions. And also, the United Kingdom emphasizes NATO and the special relationship with the United States. In this regard, London could move faster independently, but would seek visible alignment with European partners to demonstrate continued relevance in continental security affairs. And we have seen, for instance, how Trump was today a little bit angry with British because they couldn't use one island to deploy also capabilities and in the Middle East. To sum up, we could say as a global European assessment that from a Europeanist point of view, the E3's coordinated stance illustrates 3 broader dynamics. 1, European unity under pressure, because crises often accelerate integration and policy coherence. 2nd, complementary with the United States, but no dependence of the United States. However, partnership within NATO. And thirdly, a gradual strengthening of Europe's strategic capacity, using crisis as catalyst for deeper defense cooperation. I think that in the coming days or weeks, therefore, we would expect calibrated, legally grounded, and alliance-based actions designed to deter further escalation while reinforcing Europe's role as a credible geopolitical actor.
And moving on to the final question, the given potential for wider regional escalation, what impact could the ongoing conflict have on European energy markets, first of all, and then maybe the supply stability, as well as potential migration flows towards Europe? Are the governments prepared for these secondary effects?
Well, frankly speaking, the concern is not only the immediate military escalation, but as you mentioned, the secondary systemic effects on Europe's energy security, economic stability, and migration management. In this regard, the European approach tends to frame this risk within resilience, diversification, and collective coordination under the European Union framework. If we will see impact on European energy markets, and if we could have also an impact on supply stability, of course, there are short-term risks. For instance, price volatility and market anxiety. Widening regional conflict, especially if it affects shipping lines such as the Strait of Hormuz, could trigger oil and gas price spikes. Additionally, could increase insurance and shipping costs. And the close of the Strait of Hormuz could create a speculative volatility in European energy markets. Even without direct supply disruption, markets react to geopolitical risk premiums, which affect inflation and industrial costs in Europe. It's important to highlight Europe's structural vulnerability to external shocks. This could be in the short term, seen as a short-term risk. What could we see in medium term? Well, in medium term, we should wait for an answer in terms of diversification as a strategic shield. Since the 2022 energy crisis, in this regard, the European Union has accelerated diversification with LNG, with other partners like US, Norway, Qatar. Or we have accelerated in the European Union as well renewable energy deployment or joint gas purchasing mechanisms, as well as strategic storage coordination. In this regard, countries like Germany have rapidly expanded LNG infrastructures, while France relies heavily on nuclear energy as a stabilizing factor, because France has nuclear plants, and in this regard, the energy crisis has more impact on Germany than on France. But a crisis would test, but not necessarily break, Europe's improved resilience. Why? Because the European Union is arguably better prepared than it was in 2021 when the war in Ukraine started. Though, of course, the European Union is not immune, but is better prepared than before. Regarding long-term, in a long-term risk, well, it's going to be a vector of acceleration of strategic autonomy. A regional escalation in the conflict could, first, reinforce the political argument for energy sovereignty. Second, accelerate Green Deal objectives. And thirdly, deepen investment in renewables and hydrogen. In this regard, crisis could become a catalyst for deeper integration and strategic autonomy rather than fragmentation. It means that the crisis could become a catalyst, and it could be seen also as an opportunity to accelerate integration and strategic autonomy. On the other hand, there are other risks, like potential migration flows toward Europe, that they could create immediate pressure scenarios. And if escalation destabilizes part of the Middle East, we could see refugee flows could increase. As well, transit countries like, for example, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, could face additional strain, and the Mediterranean routes may experience renewed pressure. But on the other hand, migration flows tend to correlate with armed conflict, economic collapse, and state fragility. And now the question is if Europeans are enough preparedness, because the European Union has developed more structured mechanisms since 2015, when we had the refugees crisis after the war in Syria and in Afghanistan. And now we have better mechanisms of cooperation and coordination. We approved a new pact on migration and asylum. We strengthened border coordination through Frontex, and we improved financial support for neighboring transit states. However, political consensus remains fragile. Migration remains a polarizing issue within the European member states, especially now with extreme right parties. But from an European perspective, institutional preparedness is stronger, and political unity, however, is less guaranteed. Then, if we answer the question, are governments prepared for secondary effects? We should say that on energy, we are relatively more prepared, thanks to post-2022 reforms. Now, Europe has a higher storage levels, diversified suppliers, emergency solidarity mechanisms, and more coordinated crisis response tools. And this suggests moderate resilience to short-term disruptions. But in the case of migration, we are partially prepared. While administrative mechanisms exist, governments still face domestic political pressures, rise of populist narratives, and uneven burden sharing among member states. It means that a significant surge could test internal solidarity. To sum up, from an European point of view, the risk of escalation reinforces the need for deeper European integration, not renationalization. Second, energy resilience demonstrates the value of collective action. Thirdly, migration management requires solidarity, shared responsibility, and external partnerships. And as well, the crisis strengthened the argument for European strategic autonomy while maintaining cooperation with the United States and regional actors. In short, Europe is more structurally prepared than in past crises, particularly on energy. However, the political sustainability of collective responses, especially on migration issues, remains the real stress test. A widening conflict would therefore function as both as a challenge and a defining moment for Europe's ambition to act as a cohesive geopolitical actor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senor Sanchez, for sharing this rich analysis with us today. It surely contributed much to understanding Europe's perspective on the current crisis, and not only. We hope to see you again in future. And to our audience, I'd like to thank you for joining Crescent Research Center's expert interview series. Stay with us for more interesting discussions. Thank you and goodbye.